I still remember the night everything changed. It was early October, that quiet kind of evening in Oregon where the air smells like pine and distant rain. Robert and Linda Parker had been married for 40 years, high school sweethearts who built a simple, steady life. Everyone in their small town used to call them the forever couple. They raised 2 kids, bought a little house near the lake, and every Sunday morning, Robert still brought her coffee in bed, black for him, light and sweet for her. They had their routine, their quiet love, and their comfortable silence. But what no one saw was the distance growing between them, slow and invisible, like rust eating through metal. It started after their youngest moved out. The house felt too big, too quiet. Robert filled his time with his tools in the garage, fixing old radios and talking about retirement. Linda, on the other hand, started walking every morning. Said it cleared her head. She joined a community book club, volunteered at the library, and even started painting again after decades. To anyone else, it looked like she was just rediscovering herself. But to Linda, it felt more like she was disappearing inside her own life. One afternoon, Robert came home early from the hardware store. The front door was unlocked, which was unusual. He called her name. No answer. When he walked into the living room, he heard her voice, low and soft, from the back porch. She was on the phone, laughing in a way he hadn't heard in years. He didn't say anything that day. He just stood there, half hidden behind the kitchen wall, and listened to her laugh. Not out of suspicion, just confusion. That night at dinner, she was quiet. When he asked how her day was, she smiled. Just the same. But Robert noticed something. Her smile didn't reach her eyes anymore. Weeks passed. She became more distant, more distracted. Sometimes she'd stay out longer after her walks. Sometimes she'd come home smelling like someone else's cologne, faint but real. Robert told himself he was imagining it, that, after 40 years, he should know better than to doubt her. But one night, as he walked into the living room to turn off the TV, he saw her phone light up. A message flashed across the screen. "I miss you too." He froze. His heart pounded like it hadn't in years. He picked up the phone, hesitated, and then set it back down without opening the message. The next morning, Linda acted normal, humming while she made breakfast. Robert just sat there, staring at her hands as they moved over the pan. Hands that had raised his children, comforted him through every loss, held his face during hard days. And now, maybe those same hands were holding someone else. That day, Robert drove out to the lake. He sat in his truck for hours, staring at the water. He thought about all the birthdays, the Christmases, the nights they fell asleep holding hands. He thought about how love used to feel like gravity, something that held everything together. Now it felt like silence. That evening, when Linda came home, he asked her gently, "Is there something you want to tell me?" She paused. For a moment her face went pale, then soft again. "What do you mean?" she said, pretending to sound casual. "I don't know," he said, his voice calm but tired. "Just feels like you're somewhere else lately." Linda looked away. Her lips trembled. For a second he thought she might tell him everything. But instead she smiled weakly and said, "I'm just tired. Rob, don't start thinking too much." He nodded, pretending to believe her. But that night, while she was in the shower, Robert finally opened her phone. The messages were short, nothing too explicit, but they were enough. "Can't stop thinking about you. When can I see you again? Yesterday was perfect." He closed his eyes and felt the weight of 40 years crumble inside him. He didn't shout. He didn't break anything. He just sat on the edge of the bed until she came out, hair wrapped in a towel, humming softly. She looked at him and froze. She knew from his face that he'd seen everything. For a long minute, neither of them said a word. Then Robert stood up, looked at her, and said quietly, "Who is he?" Linda's eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing. That's when he realized. Sometimes the silence hurts more than the truth itself. Linda didn't answer right away. She just sat down slowly, clutching the towel tighter around her shoulders. Her hands were shaking. For a moment, Robert thought she might lie, say it was a friend, a wrong number, anything. But she didn't. Instead, she whispered, His name is Tom. He's from the community center." Robert just stood there. The name meant nothing to him, yet somehow it felt heavier than it should have. He nodded once, then quietly said, "How long?" Linda's voice broke. "A few months." Robert looked at her like he was seeing a stranger. "After 40 years, Linda? You couldn't just talk to me?" She started crying then, real tears. Not guilty ones, but the kind that come from deep exhaustion. "I tried, Rob, I really did. But you stopped hearing me a long time ago." He stared at her, stunned. "I stopped hearing you? I built everything for us. I worked 2 jobs so we could retire without worrying about a damn thing." Linda wiped her face, her voice trembling. "Yes, you worked hard. You gave me everything except you. Somewhere along the way, we stopped being us. We became roommates with memories." Robert didn't know what to say. It wasn't anger he felt anymore. It was something colder, a quiet ache that came with realizing you'd lost someone long before they left. They slept in separate rooms that night. The next morning, Linda was gone when Robert woke up. She left a note on the kitchen table that said, "I need a few days to think." He sat there for hours, staring at the handwriting he'd known for most of his life. He didn't tell the kids, didn't call anyone, just went about his days like a ghost. He'd see her car missing from the driveway and feel that empty space in his chest widen. 3 days later, she came back. Her eyes were swollen, and she looked older than he'd ever seen her. She sat across from him at the kitchen table and said, "It's over." With him, Robert didn't ask how or why. He just nodded. "Why did you do it, Linda? After all this time?" She took a deep breath and said something he would never forget. "Because I felt invisible. Every morning, I'd wake up next to you and feel like I didn't exist anymore. Tom noticed me. He listened. He made me feel like I still mattered. But it wasn't about him, Rob. It was about me, trying to find the woman I used to be." Her honesty hit harder than her betrayal ever could. He looked at her and realized she wasn't the same 25-year-old girl he married. She was a 65-year-old woman trying to remember what it felt like to be seen. Robert didn't forgive her that day, but he also didn't walk away. They sat together in silence, the kind that comes not from anger, but understanding. Weeks passed. They talked more, really talked, for the first time in years. Sometimes they fought, sometimes they cried, sometimes they just sat holding hands like old times. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. One evening, they took a walk by the lake, the same place they'd gone on their first date. The sun was setting, painting the water gold. Robert turned to her and said, "Do you love him?" She shook her head. "No, I loved how he made me feel for a little while." "But love, that was always you, Rob." He didn't reply. He just looked out at the water and said quietly, "Then let's try again. Not like before. Let's actually see each other this time." Linda smiled faintly, tears in her eyes. "I'd like that." They didn't rebuild their marriage overnight. It took months. Therapy sessions, long drives, awkward dinners, and small steps toward trust. Some nights, Robert would wake up and still feel the ache of what happened. But he'd look over at her, asleep beside him, and remember why he stayed. Because love, after 40 years, isn't just about loyalty. It's about choosing someone again, even after they've broken your heart. A year later, on their 41st anniversary, Linda gave him a letter. It said, "You once said love is about building something together. I think we forgot that buildings need repairs. I broke something precious and I can't undo that. But I promise to keep fixing what's left, brick by brick, with you." Robert folded the letter and held her hand. The pain was still there, but so was the peace. Because sometimes the real shock isn't the cheating. It's realizing how fragile love becomes when people stop noticing each other. As they sat on the porch that night, watching the moonlight dance across the lake, Robert whispered, 40 years, huh?" Linda smiled softly. "Let's make the next 40 count." And for the first time in a long time, they both meant it.